Hi everyone, I'm Ava. I'm an American living here in the Netherlands, and lately I've been enjoying this amazing weather that we've had here. It is the end of February and it should not feel like spring, but it feels like spring, and I'm enjoying it even though deep down inside, maybe even not that deep down, I am terrified of global warming. So my concerns for global warming aside, I wanted to talk to you about some of the cool aspects of Dutch cities. Now, when I lived in the US, I didn't notice these things in American cities, so I definitely was drawn to those things here in the Netherlands. Some of the things are bigger and more structural, and the other things I want to talk about are kind of small and tell you a little bit about Dutch culture. So the first thing about Dutch cities that I wanted to talk to you about is the fact that many of them, if not all of them, happen to have a center. Now, if you're European, maybe this is more familiar to you because I've noticed this in other European cities as well. But in the US, you folks, we do not have a city center. We just have the downtown area. So if you are in an American city, if you want to go to a place where it's all happening, you go downtown. In the Netherlands, you go to the city center. The only exception to this that I've noticed is that when I lived in Philadelphia, we had a center city in Philadelphia, and that kind of is like the center of Dutch cities. But that's the only one that comes close. Other than that, I haven't seen a center in any of the American cities that I've been to. And even the one in Philadelphia is a little different. The Dutch cities, for instance, that I've noticed, if you have a center, first of all, that's where everything is happening. It's the busiest area of the city typically, and it also usually has a train station. So in Amsterdam, you have Amsterdam Centraal, and in Utrecht, you have Utrecht Centraal, and so on for the Dutch cities in the Netherlands. In the US, you do have a train station for a city, but it doesn't need to be near the center per se. It could just be in a different part. So in Philadelphia, we had Center City, but the train station was very much not in the center. This is definitely a weird thing to have a preference about, but I definitely prefer the fact that cities have a center as opposed to a neighborhood that just happens to be happening. Happens to be happening. That's a great sentence, isn't it? So what I like about the center is that if you have neighborhoods growing around it, right, you can live in those neighborhoods and you are kind of equidistant from the center. Hence the center, it makes a circle. That makes so much sense. I feel like when I'm living in, or even when I'm just visiting a city with a city center, I am less likely to live in a bubble because even though there's a lot happening outside the city center in cities that have one, I feel like I'm still more likely to gravitate towards the center or then move to other neighborhoods, whereas in the US, neighborhoods tend to have like their own characteristic, and of course that happens in Dutch cities too. But because the US cities are so sprawled out and they don't really have this center focus, I find myself more likely to live in a bubble. That was my experience in the US, and it could be different for others, but this is just how I've experienced it. The next things I love about living in the Netherlands, and more specifically living in a Dutch city, are the cobblestone streets. I guess they're more like brick streets and not stone, but they're gorgeous nonetheless. This you will only find in very, very select cities in the US, and that too, I want to say 1 or 2 streets. I'm thinking of Philadelphia, which is one of the oldest cities in the US, so it wasn't surprising that a couple of streets in Philadelphia had this, but it's really not common in the US. In the Netherlands, just walk to an old city and there are cobblestone streets. I freaking love that.
But sometimes, do I want to walk on the bike lane instead of the actual sidewalk because of it? Yes, also yes.
You are of course more likely to experience the cobblestone streets in the Netherlands in old parts of the countries and older parts of the cities that tend to be the city centers. So that's something to keep in mind, but I absolutely love it. In Utrecht, I enjoy walking on these streets, and literally each time when I walk on it, I feel like I'm living my childhood dream. Growing up, especially in the US, when you have this image of Europe, you think of cobblestone streets and then cafes and walking on the cobblestone streets in the rain. Well, in the Netherlands, you got that covered. You have cobblestone streets in very many places. So going along this theme of old stuff, because I'm just going to admit it right here, I love the old stuff in Dutch cities. And it was one of the reasons that I moved here. So going along this old stuff theme, I was surprised to find that you could find mills. So I want to call them windmills, but they're not the new fancy windmills, but these like old windmills. I really thought that windmills were something that you would find outside the cities in the Netherlands, but oh no, Oh, no, no, no. You have windmills in the cities.
So I am now walking through the Volkelenbuurt in Utrecht, and what do I see? A windmill. There it is, folks, right in front of you, in the middle of a freaking city.
Like in Amsterdam, one of these beautiful old windmills has a brewery attached to it. In Utrecht, one of them has a store at the bottom of it. I think it's like a meat store, and they also sell flour, which I guess makes sense because it's a mill. I see what's going on there, but it's just really fun for me to walk around, you know, minding my own business, and then I'm like, oh my god, there is a windmill. That's right, I live in the Netherlands. It doesn't get old, I'm telling you. Some things just don't get old. But speaking of things that are old, the next thing I thought was so cool about some of the Dutch cities is that you can actually find castles in them. In the Netherlands, we have Disney World where there is a castle and it is totally fake. But in the Netherlands, you can actually go visit palaces and castles that are for real. In Amsterdam, for instance, the palace is just there in the city center. And in Utrecht, while there's like remnants of old castles, there are actual castles that are like around the city limits. So not quite in, but around it. And in other Dutch cities that are maybe slightly smaller, there are palaces and castles. How freaking cool is that? Now, if you and I have met before on this channel or through my blog, you may know that one of the reasons I moved to the Netherlands is for the country's lovely canals in its cities. So whenever I've mentioned this before, I get at least one person commenting that not every city is Amsterdam. Well, I live in Utrecht and there are canals in Utrecht. There are also canals in other cities like Leiden. So it's definitely not every single city in the Netherlands that has it. So there is that disclaimer, but it's present in Dutch cities. In the US, you just have these big rivers that could go through a city or these like huge lakes. You don't really see these beautiful canals that are characteristic of Dutch cities. And of course, being the superficial person that I am, only a little bit, but I just have to own it, you know? It's who I am. Being the slightly superficial person that I am, I moved to the Netherlands because I wanted to walk around and walk alongside these wonderful canals. Rain, snow, sunshine, doesn't matter. I feel like my life is just so much better if I could live next to a canal. This is also a great moment to give a shout out to Utrecht for, first of all, not only having beautiful, beautiful canals through its city, it also has these cellars that I am completely obsessed with. So these cellars are, I would say, unique to Utrecht. I haven't really seen them in other Dutch cities, haha, but not like I've had much of a chance to explore, given current times. But these cellars are really amazing. They're kind of cool because first of all, they're really at the level of the water. And second, you are in a wharf cellar. How amazing is that? So I have gone to a whiskey bar in one of these wharf cellars that I completely adored. I felt like if I was gonna drink whiskey and do a whiskey tasting, it's got to be in a cellar like that one. That was definitely a extremely cool experience. I also unfortunately know that some of these are Airbnbs, but many of them also are just terrasjes for cafes that are at the street level, and then they have a section that's kind of at the bottom. It's the cellar of the cafes that you can sit outside in the summer and enjoy a drink at. As I'm talking about everything being old and beautiful in the Netherlands and in Dutch cities, and I said that I was a little bit superficial, I started thinking about how in Dutch cities, you actually need to maintain the outer facade of a building. So to explain that a little better, in the Netherlands, there are actually laws about what the outside of buildings can look like. They can't be really funky. So in the US, you will see buildings that are painted, I don't know, bright blue or bright green, and yeah, they exist. In the Netherlands, things on the outside are kind of maintained a certain way and they need to match and be preserved because they are, you know, really very old. I would say that definitely contributes to the whole maintaining and preserving this old beauty. So that's a special thing about the Netherlands. I don't know if every place has this law of keeping and maintaining the facades to be a certain way. And I cannot make a video like this one without talking about the Dutch and their bikes. So no, I'm not going to talk about the bike lanes. I'm going to talk about something less exciting to the Dutch, or to humans in general, and that is parking. Who doesn't hate parking? Like, doesn't matter if you're on a bike or a car or whatever, parking sucks. But in the Netherlands, parking your bike is a little more fun. I would say no Dutch train station is complete without an area for bicycle parking. This can get out of hand. in the most awesome way possible. So Utrecht, for instance, has the largest bicycle parking in the world. You heard that right. That's my city, folks. And you want to guess how many bicycle parking spots it has? It has 12,500 bicycle parking spots according to the city's website. That is insane. That's a lot of bikes in one spot. And in Amsterdam, they've decided to do something a little funky where they've decided to park their bikes on the water. So they have a bicycle parking that's on the water, which looks amazing. When I first walked out there out of Central Station and I saw this, I didn't know what to say. I had no reaction, literally, because it's just like you see the bikes after bikes after bikes all parked on top of each other. I have never seen bikes parked on top of each other in the US, so that is a sight to behold. So these are some of the things that I love about Dutch cities that I wanted to share with you today. As usual, let me know what you think in the comments down below, and until next time.